Put your seatbelts on and get ready for the ride. We're the freaking New York Jets, so we're built for this shit.
Hello, welcome to another episode of In the Trenches with Gang Green. I'm your host, Bubbs. Today is Tuesday, June 17th. Hopefully everybody's having a good day so far today. This is episode 557 of the In the Trenches with Gang Green podcast. I thank you, as always, for joining me. For those tuning in on YouTube, make sure to please like and subscribe. Of course, appreciate all of those tuning in on all the different audio podcast platforms. And today we've got some more New York Jets news to discuss, as the Jets have added to their kicker competition earlier today. The Jets signed UFL standout kicker Harrison Mevis, so we will break down that move to open up today's program. And then I wanted to dive into an article from Pro Football Focus that named 2025 as a make or break year for Breece Hall. We'll dive into that, and also just want to dive into Breece Hall's 2025 outlook as a whole later on in today's episode. As always, though, before we begin, we've got to tell you about our podcast partners, starting with our friends over at BetUS, America's favorite online sportsbook. If you want to get in on any of the sports betting action, check out BetUS and use my link in the description of this video to get a 125% sign-up bonus on your first 3 deposits up to $2,000. Also, our friends over at SeatGeek. If you want any of the hottest tickets in sports or entertainment, check out SeatGeek and use promo code BUBSONSPORTS for $20 off your first purchase and get yourself out to some awesome events. And also check out Huga House if you want any of their awesome selection of hats, sweatshirts, t-shirts. Check them out and use code BUBS for 15% off any purchase and get yourself some awesome Huga House swag. So here we go, episode 557. Thank you, as always, for joining me here on a Tuesday program as we roll on into the middle and late stages here of June. Today, I wanted to break down the New York Jets adding to their kicker competition. Earlier today, it was announced that the New York Jets were signing Harrison Mevis. He now joins a kicker room, a kicker competition with Caden Davis and Anders Carlson. And it continues to be this youth movement for the New York Jets from a kicker perspective after they moved on from Greg Zuerlein last month, the 37-year-old who had a terrible 2024 season. Harrison Mevis is awesome. I just want to say this. I'm not going to sit here and tell you he's going to win the kicker job. I'm not going to sit here and tell you he's going to be the greatest kicker and the Jets have found their kicker of the future. But Mevis has got a lot to like, and there's a lot about him that just makes him easy to root for and somebody to keep an eye on here in this kicker competition when training camp begins in late July. He's 6 foot, 242 pounds, so a massive kicker, and that 6 foot, 242 pound build has coined him the nickname the thicker kicker. A massive specimen, a massive human being to be a kicker. So just that in general makes him easy to root for, makes him kind of a funny player here, if you will. 23 years old. When you look at some of the background of Harrison Mevis, spent 4 years at Missouri. And then last year came out as a 2024 UDFA, signed with the Panthers in May. So shortly after the draft, was with the Panthers for a part of training camp into early August, was then released by Carolina during the middle of training camp and the preseason last year. Didn't sign on with anybody else the rest of the 2024 campaign. And in here early in 2025, signed on with the Birmingham Stallions of the UFL and had a very productive 2025 UFL season. And now, of course, here signs on with the New York Jets. I want to read you some of his numbers with the UFL, and then we'll dive into some of his Missouri numbers as well, going back to his college days. Very successful season in the UFL. 10 regular season games played, 20 of 21 on field goals. That's a 95.2% field goal percentage, the most effective, efficient, and overall just best kicker this year in the 2025 UFL season. 5 of 6 from 50 yards. This guy has got a leg. 50-plus yards this season was 5 of 6, and his longest kick of the season was 54 yards. But I also think more importantly, what sticks out with Harrison Mevis this year at the UFL level was what he was able to do inside 50-plus. He was perfect inside 50-plus, was 2 for 2 from 20 to 29 yards, was 5 for 5 from 30 to 39 yards. And then when he got to the 40-yard range, was also perfect at 8 for 8. So this was a guy that was perfect inside of 50, and then from 50-plus only missed one kick on the year, 95% field goal percentage. Very impressive no matter which level you're doing that at. And then in his one postseason game with the Stallions was 1 of 2. Both of those kicks came from 50-plus. The one kick he made was 56 yards. So for a big guy, he's got a cannon of a leg. And you look at his college numbers, 50 career games with Missouri, 89 of 106 in his career. That's 84% field goal percentage for his career in college. Was 12 for 18 from 50-plus. And then removing the 50-plus and just inside 50 in his college career at Missouri was 77 of 88, which is 87.5%. Has got some records, definitely left a mark in college. 89 field goals made was first in Missouri program history. His 415 points was first in Missouri program history. He also holds the longest field goal in SEC history with a 61-yard game winner against Kansas State in 2023. And during his 2021 season, he led college football with 26 field goals made. So very successful collegiate player, spent a couple months with Carolina, was released, signed on in the UFL, and had a very good year. He now joins Anders Carlson and Caden Davis in this kicker competition. We'll see if there's, of course, any other corresponding moves, how this all, of course, plays out during training camp. But another name and another guy to throw in to this kicker competition, and another young piece, right? The New York Jets moved on from Greg Zuerlein. He was 37 years old. The three guys battling out now are Anders Carlson, 27, Caden Davis, 21, and now Harrison Mevis, 23. That's an average age between the three of those guys of 23.6. So young players with some untapped potential, limited NFL experience, but you hope you can find something in one of these guys that maybe they can be your long-term answer at kicker in a perfect world. And Mevis obviously did impress the Jets a little bit, not just through what he was able to do in the UFL, but it's also important to note that the Jets tried out Mevis a couple days ago. The Jets had a couple kickers in, 2 from the UFL, Mevis being one of them. They also worked out Rodrigo Blankenship, who I've mentioned on this podcast before as someone to maybe keep an eye on as an addition to bring in here. They obviously chose Mevis. They also worked out Michael Badgley, who has spent some time in the NFL as a veteran kicker. So they worked those three guys out. So clearly the Jets see something in Mevis from the workout. Of course, what he did here in the UFL, something to keep an eye on, like I mentioned in the open. The thicker kicker, he is a big, fat kicker, a likable guy, easy to root for, it seems like. Definitely funny to see somebody like that just kicking bombs, right? 60-plus yards, longest field goal in SEC history, still has that record to this day. We don't know what he's going to be, but somebody else to keep an eye on. And hey, Harrison Mevis takes over the kicking job. Certainly would be something to, I would say, smile about if that does happen here for the UFL standout and Missouri standout as well. So that's the kicker news as the New York Jets, Chris Banjo, continue to try and find solutions on special teams after what was a horrific year last year on special teams, especially on the kicking front. Now, I wanted to get into something else here today on the podcast as well, on Breece Hall. So Pro Football Focus, right, this time of year, kind of a dead zone right now in the NFL. You get a lot of these sites, ESPN, PFF, kind of release articles, different themed articles, make or break players, guys that are going to breakout candidates, guys that might regress, all this stuff. There's so many different things that come out this time of year. And I always keep my eye on it to see if any Jets are in there. Sometimes how it connects to the Jets, whatever. And I thought this was interesting because Pro Football Focus released today their article on 2025, every team's make or break player for the 2025 season. And for the New York Jets, they put Breece Hall as the make or break player this year. Now, you could probably also throw Justin Fields in there. Maybe you want to think of some other guys. Fields would be the next biggest one because I think we've all agreed with Justin Fields, right? If this doesn't work out this year, he's probably not going to get a chance to start anywhere else. Maybe backup, that's it. But Breece Hall is interesting. We've talked a lot about Breece Hall, and I wanted to read this blurb here. This was the quote from Pro Football Focus in the article that stated, Hall has been the subject of criticism and trade rumors this offseason. Head coach Aaron Glenn recently shot the ladder down, but Hall still needs a bounce-back campaign to secure a long-term future in New York. He earned a career-low 62 PFF overall grade last season, though much of that seemed to stem from a lack of focus. Hall fumbled 6 times and dropped 8 passes. There is a chance that he is a dynamic playmaker in a new offense, but there may be an equal chance that 2025 is his last season in New York. And that is totally correct. And we all, I think, agree. This is a make-or-break year, no doubt about it, for Breece Hall. But I will say this, I fully expect, and I've talked about this a lot this season, while there is that realistic possibility that Breece Hall goes out there this year and struggles and doesn't have the year that we think he does, and you've heard some smoke around if the Jets are completely out of it by the deadline, is he somebody that they move on from? I don't think that'll happen, but in the world that it does, I guess that could be a scenario, and that's all possible. But I still believe, even with how bad last year was for Breece Hall in this Jets offense, mind you that Breece Hall was dealing with the knee injury last year and admitted that that hindered his play big time. And I get the fumbles, and I totally understand. There was even some times, we mentioned this on the podcast last year, a lot of times coming out of the games where you'd watch him and it felt like his vision wasn't quite right? There was a couple runs where he just ran into traffic as opposed to taking an opening and taking it upfield, which you saw him do in the first 2 years. Last year, it felt like that wasn't there. It also, of course, felt like the burst as well wasn't there, which was probably a result of the nagging knee injury that he was dealing with, during the 2024 campaign. But I really think that Breece Hall is going to have a big year this year. I do. I've said that many times. I'm never bought into the trade rumors. I never bought into the idea of trading him. To me, in the business of keeping good players, and you look at this Jets team, they have a lot of good young talent. Breece Hall is one of those guys with good young talent. And I've talked about this so much, and I'll say it again here. And really my main point to all of this, there's a couple guys in this Jets team that you can name a list of guys that are going to benefit the most from coaching. I'll throw Sauce in there. I think he could benefit the most from this, from this new coach staff. Right, we've talked about Garrett Wilson. I think he kind of is under the radar, could benefit the most just because of the fact that I think Engstrand is going to be able to get him a lot more easier routes, going to give him a lot more just scheming him open. The passing offense is going to be centered around him. That necessarily hasn't been the case over the last couple of years, even though he has put up 3 1,000-yard seasons. That's why it's so exciting to see what Garrett Wilson could potentially do this year. But Breece Hall is another one of those players. Breece Hall and the Jets coaching staff the last couple of years have done him absolutely no favors. We say this all the time. It took Nathaniel Hackett until that Giants game in 2023 to realize that his star second-year running back had a legitimate ability to make plays as a receiver. That's how long it took him to do that. Last year, they barely used him as a receiver. There's also been so many times where you walked away from games last year and games throughout his career where he had 9, 10, 12 carries. Breece did not have a game last season where he had over 20 carries. As a matter of fact, the most carries he had in a game last year was 18. And that game, he had 113 yards and added on 56 more through the air as a receiver in that tough loss to Buffalo where Zerline sold the game, right? As we all remember, the red line game. That was the only time they fed him the ball. He had success. They went away from him. He averaged 6.3 yards per carry that night. Other than that, it was 14 carries, 12, 9, 10, a couple games, 16. That's not it. And that should change this year because the Jets are going to be a run-first, ground-and-pound team. And, oh, yeah, on top of that, this is an offensive line that should improve. This is a team that should be winning games, winning the battle in the trenches, right? That is a big impact on Breece Hall. Also has a big impact, of course, on Justin Fields from a pass protection standpoint, but just from a run blocking standpoint, Breece Hall is going to probably be running behind the best offensive line that he has ran behind in his career and should have the best coaching staff, the best offensive coordinator potentially that he's had in his career in terms of knowing how to utilize him. And the reason I say that is because you look at Detroit and the way they utilized Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery as that 1-2 punch. Gibbs not only as a rusher, but what he can do out of the backfield as a receiver. Right, Breece had 591 receiving yards on 76 catches in 2023. And that was with the first part of the season, Nathaniel Hackett not knowing that he was much of a threat, right? He still put up those numbers. I don't think it's crazy to say, and I fully believe that in a run-first offense that's going to be centered around running the ball, ground and pound, Breece is going to get a significant more amount of carries. You're not going to see games where they just don't run the football like we saw last year countless times. And also, how many times have we seen the Jets have success on the ground and then move away from it? That's not going to be the case this year. If they're running the ball well, they're going to stick with the run. That should be what happens. Right? So I fully believe that Breece is in for a big year. And I also just from the receiving perspective, 500 plus, maybe touches around those 600 receiving yards. And then from a rushing perspective, you're looking at a significant more amount of carries as opposed to the 209 he had last year. You could be looking at upwards to 30 to 40 more carries, right? If you want to compare him to Gibbs' season last year, where Gibbs had 250 carries, which was tied for 11th in the NFL, Breece at 209, that number should rise a ton, which could lead to over 1,000 yard season as a rusher and then add on another couple touchdowns, 70 plus, let's say, receptions from a receiving perspective, because you have an offensive coordinator that's already mentioned it, how they want to use him, right? And knowing his receiving ability. He actually has a competent coaching staff to hopefully do that, and they should do that. So 100% it is a make or break year. If Breece goes out there and has what he did last year, 210 carries, 850, 60 yards, 4 touchdowns is not much of a factor, and all this, and he looks slow, doesn't have the burst, and he's healthy, right? Then that's another thing. But best offensive line he's been running is going to run behind. The identity of this team is going to be run the football, and it's going to be led by Breece Hall. I'll also add this. The Jets' run scheme and run concepts over the last couple years have been very vanilla, right? I think this year you're going to see a lot more where the defense, keep the defense on their heels, keep them guessing a little bit. the last couple years, it's been, like you could sit there as a Jet fan, be 10 beers deep, and you would know what play that the Jets were running. You would know if they're going to run the football. Just think, defensive coordinators, defense that get paid millions to stop the run, stop other teams, they're also going to know. And they clearly did, because the concepts were so boring, so vanilla, so basic, right? This year, I think you're going to see a lot more non-vanilla, non-basic run concepts. You're going to see teams not have to stack the box, right? Teams typically just stack the box against Breece because they knew it was coming. I don't think you're going to see that this year. I think one area you're going to see a lot of is the read options. You see that a lot in Baltimore. I think that could be something that the Jets put into this offense where you're going to have those read options between Fields and Breece. Fields has that ability to keep it and utilize his legs as a 1,000-yard rusher, or you give it to Breece and he has that ability. It's not going to be to the level of Lamar and Derrick Henry because those are top players at their position, right? But that's a type of offense. Those are the type of plays you can see, the type of explosiveness that's possible for this team with those read options to have that success, keep the defense guessing, which is something the Jets haven't been able to do in the 3 years with Breece Hall. You now have that ability with him. And just the mindset wise, I mean, I think Breece coming in with a little bit of a chip on his shoulder. The first year he was awesome, then tore his ACL. There was so much hype going into year two. Had a solid year, all things considered, in year two. And then last year, all we heard was the hype for Breece Hall. He's going to put up Christian McCaffrey numbers, right? That we've seen 1,800 total yards. We were seeing, the first pick in fantasy drafts. That's how highly rated Breece Hall was. Now it's like he's at the bottom. People are beating him up a little bit. People are seriously questioning if he's the answer or the future here in New York. I think he's going to come in with a little bit of a chip on his shoulder. He kind of mentioned that at his press conference. Right? He still has confidence in himself. And I think that's another aspect. The mindset, I think, is another aspect to add into to all this. This is the first time really in his NFL career that he has been doubted a little bit, especially by this fan base, right? We'll see what he does with it. But I've said it all along. I expect a big year from Breece. I have continued to believe in Breece. Never bought into the trade rumors. I think a lot of things as I just broke down in the last 10, 15 minutes, you break down a lot of the things that the Jets are going to do on offense. It all fits into Breece Hall's wheelhouse and sets Breece Hall up for success, in my opinion. But it is a make or break year. And I think for Breece, he's going to have a big season, and we'll see what happens with the contract down the road. So those are my thoughts on the Breece Hall make or break year. That'll do it for an episode. Let me know what you think in the comments section down below. What are your thoughts on the New York Jets signing kicker Harrison Mevis, the thicker kicker, as he joins a young kicker room as the competition continues? And also your thoughts on this being a make or break year for Breece Hall in 2025, your expectations for the New York Jets running back, and what your thoughts are on this Jets offense and Breece's role. That'll do it. Stay tuned. A lot more content coming your way. Appreciate you all. As always, until next time, JETS, 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 Jets.